Good morning, Binanceans. Welcome to Binance Beach episode 28. I'm your host, Lotto, and we have our very good friend, James Quinn-Kumar, joining us this morning to talk 2025 predictions. Welcome, James.
Hey, Liam. Thanks for having me.
Good to be back. You were on episode, I can't even remember. I think it's been at least 10 or 15 apps since you've been on. So welcome back to the show.
I mean, I must have done a great job if you've if you've left it this long to have me back. But hopefully, I won't disappoint this time.
Well, you were the top voted person for our Binance Beach live panel. So maybe you're more popular than you think, mate.
I'd like to think that.
Well, what is popular is Bitcoin token. So let's look at the Bitcoin price for this week. We've had a nice little surge up from the consolidation period we saw around that 90 to 95 kind of level. And we had a bit of a run down almost to that $90,000 level. So well done if you bought the dip down there. But this morning in particular, we saw a really strong jump up above the 100K mark again. We hit above, I think, even 102 at one point, and we're sitting just above the 100,000 US dollar mark, which is pretty cool. That puts us up on the week just under 5.5% in US dollar terms, which is nice to see, and nice to see us crack six figures again. Looking down the rest of our kind of key metrics that we like to track week on week, our fear and greed index has finally come down from those highs that we've been seeing really consistently through December and January. We were sitting in that 70 to 90 range really consistently, but we've finally come back down with this consolidation this week to the 51 level. So that's nice to see that back in a more normal kind of range and not feeling like the market is overbought for sure. Bitcoin dominance pretty constant. We're yet to see a really strong surge in the alt side of things. But looking down at 7-day performance, XRP on an absolute tear, nearly 28% up on the week. BNB up 2%, Solana up 4%, probably lagging a little bit, those two assets. Doge up 10, and from there we move down the rest of our top 100 and see mostly kind of green on the week. Well, nice to see us, back at 100K plus. James, what is your short-term outlook on the market right now?
Short term and long term, I'm pretty bullish this year into 2025. I think, as you mentioned, we can expect a bit of the Trump pump. We saw that in late November and had a positive impact on the price. And so when he's inaugurated next Monday, it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts. But I'm not expecting anything to happen too soon. He had a number of favorable things to say about crypto and regulation in particular. And of course, that Bitcoin strategic reserve that you mentioned. But I think all of these things will take some time to play out. But I do think that directionally, it's got to be positive for the industry, more certainty, more clarity. And I think that'll lead to more institutions kind of coming on board, more adoption in general. And like you said, the macro environment's starting to look a bit more favorable as well, with some anticipated rate cuts coming up. So overall, everything is pointing towards a pretty good year in 2025. So I have to say I'm pretty bullish.
Well, this morning we had December CPI come in the US. It was in line with market expectations at 2.9% year over year. This is back in range, which means that we might see rate cuts be more likely. We'll be tracking that on FedWatch later in the week. We've also had a lot of teasing by Trump-affiliated officials who are potentially even in White House positions, talking about maybe positive crypto announcements on day one, which would be huge. I'd be surprised by that, to be honest, because if you looked at, I go back to the debate between Kamala and Trump, the one that we did have, and crypto wasn't mentioned, because I think for most people in the US, even though crypto holders are a large proportion of that population and were pretty vocal in the election, crypto was not mentioned in that debate. And I think if I was stepping in day one, I don't know if it would be the top of my problems to solve, issues to fix, things to address list from a running the US perspective, right? That is a huge challenge. But I think inflation is going to be Trump's number one challenge. So that reading, I'm sure they'll be pretty happy with that. And obviously markets responded really positively to the idea of some more rate cuts later in the year. Another kind of interesting point I saw this week was that the Australian M1 money supply has reached a new all-time high. Obviously, this is about as close to an exponential trend as you can get. For those unaware, M1 is the money supply that is composed of currency, demand deposits, and other liquid deposits, which includes saving deposits. So it's basically a measure of the most liquid portions of the money supply. And we've now seen this hit new highs. And this stat is pretty crazy. 74% of all new Australian money was printed since March 2020, which is basically mind-blowing. So, yeah, I'm not sure if you've got any responses to that, James. Pretty wild for anybody sitting in Australia right now.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons a lot of us are in crypto in general. Fiat currency is almost inflating away under our feet, and we're looking for stronger, more robust assets that are going to hold their value over the long term and won't inflate away. For example, Bitcoin. So, yeah, nothing surprising to people that've been in the space for a while, but I'm always interested to see what normies or people that aren't necessarily into economics or crypto have to say about trends like that, because I think when you see it for the first time, it is actually quite alarming at the rate at which money's coming into the system.
Well, I still have normie discussions every other day with my normie no corner friends about property. They just love property in this country. And I did see some data, needs to be fact checked, that property prices of the national average has doubled from 2012 to 2024. So property prices have gone up 100%. Within the same period, the money supply went up 108%. So even property, jewel of the crown, favorite child of the Australian investor, is maybe even not outperforming money supply. Of course, when you trade property, you can trade leverage. It's the only asset you can trade leverage at so comfortably as a retail investor. But it's an interesting time to be alive, interesting time to be investing, interesting time to be watching economics and inflation. Hey, let's talk 2025, because that's the point of our episode today. And I'm really keen to hear what you think is in store for next year. And I'll be weighing into giving a few of my own predictions, and we can look back on this at the end of the year and see what we got right and what we got wrong. But first up, let's go big picture. Are we having a bull market or a bear market in 2025? What do you think, James?
So I've already teased it, but bull market for sure. As I said, and as you've it's interesting actually. This week, there's a few items in that news update that I think are going to carry on throughout the year, right? So the Trump pump, as you mentioned, coming in next week. What impact will he have on the crypto market and regulations, and how will that play out in terms of companies building and people feeling more secure in terms of coming into the space? That Bitcoin strategic reserve that's been mentioned repeatedly on the campaign trail. It'll be interesting to see if that comes in and how long it takes to implement something like that. But overall, I think regulatory clarity in the US is going to have a trickle-down effect to other countries and other regions, which has got to be positive for the space. The other one that you also mentioned was, and we've just been talking about, is the macroeconomic environment. So I think with more interest rates expected this year, we'll see the appetite for risk-on assets grow, and crypto is well placed to capture a lot of that attention and investment. And so I think those two overall are going to give the market some renewed energy into 2025. And I think that will continue seeing institutional and retail adoption. So, that's more banks and financial institutions coming into the space. I expect to see more ETFs launched for some of the coins further down the stack. I expect to see more companies follow the likes of MicroStrategy and adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets. I expect to see more countries follow the strategy of El Salvador and add Bitcoin to their reserves. And overall, I think that adoption from trusted and bigger players is going to keep crypto top of the news cycle and top of mind for a lot of people. And I think we'll see really strong retail interest grow over the course of the year as well. So very bullish. What about you?
I agree. I think we're in what really to me feels like a tails I win, heads you lose scenario with Bitcoin. And obviously that flows through to the rest of the ecosystem. If Trump is able to tackle inflation, then that's a good prospect for Trump and his support and his administration, and a potential continuation of Republican administration, maybe under Vance, who we know is very pro crypto. So if Trump tames inflation, then we're going to see a really strong approach from the administration on crypto, on Bitcoin, and it's going to be hopefully setting the foundations of moving this industry from, I think, what you can still argue is the fringe into the mainstream and continuing that trend. But if we're unable to tame inflation and the Department of Government Efficiency isn't able to kind of fulfill its mandate, then we know that Bitcoin performs pretty well in inflationary environments. And, it's likely to keep pushing that asset up in the short to medium term as well. So, yeah, definitely a pretty strong outlook for 2025. I think one of the strongest outlooks we've had in quite a while. And I'm really excited to participate in the industry this year and just be a Bitcoin holder, particularly if the Aussie dollar keeps going the way it's going. I think having some protection there with a US dollar denominated asset and a global asset is going to be really a smart idea. What narratives are going to dominate in 2025, James? What's the story going to be for crypto?
I think there's a couple of parts to this, right? Having working in the industry, I think there's the regulatory clarity aspect, which I think is going to kind of play out, and then there's a retail view on this for people just coming into the space. So I'll start on regulation. So with the US seemingly turning pro crypto under Trump, as I said, I think there's going to be more regulatory clarity for businesses trying to operate, less enforcement action, because people will be aware of the rules and there'll be set rules in place. And I think that will drive a lot of innovation in the space and give consumers a lot more confidence to come in and invest. And I think, as often happens, the US will take a lead and other countries may follow. And that's definitely something I'm seeing in Australia with ASIC, the financial regulator, coming out at the end of last year with updated guidance on crypto and digital assets. So there's a consultation process at the moment, which we'll be feeding into as Binance. And we're expecting those rules to be coming out in mid-June. And that should give everyone operating the space a lot more guidance on what products are allowed to provide to users. And that may potentially involve licensing. And I think this is something the industry's been asking for a while. And 2025, finally, I think, is the year that we get a bit more clarity. What I would say is, any regulatory or any regulations need to balance, innovation and the burden on startups and smaller businesses trying to break into the space with consumer protection. So it remains to be seen what those regulations involve. But like I said, we'll be feeding into that process. And hopefully it's good for businesses and good for consumers. The other one that I see playing out, we've already seen playing out at the start of 2025, just more from an investing perspective or a price action perspective, is AI agents kind of replacing the meme meta in 2024. Although I think it's almost a like-for-like replacement, right? Instead of AI agents just seems to be the term, and it seems to be tokens with no real underlying utility just yet. But I'm hoping that over the course of the year, we see like a more of a deeper integration between AI and crypto, with AI providing more utility, whether that's helping people with analysis, trading, or even AI agents becoming their own social media influencers, which I think we're starting to kind of see. So that's a really exciting one, and a convergence of two really fast moving, innovative, disruptive sectors. So that's one I'm really excited about.
Yep, I agree. I have a contrarian take on that, but I'll save that for a bit later. For me this year, in terms of narratives, I think we're going to see a real showdown for layer one dominance. I think this is Solana's year to challenge Ethereum as the tokenization smart contract layer one leader. And that is going to be really interesting to watch. But I think Solana isn't going to be able to take that mantle very easily. I think it's going to be a hell of a battle. Solana has some momentum at the moment, I think, from both a narrative and a price perspective. But I think with a lot of the companies that have kind of led the charge in ETH, they might have been pretty distracted over the last few years with compliance and regulatory action, litigation. They may be able to refocus on product. And for ETH to win this battle, it needs to solve account abstraction and bridging. It's still too hard to move funds around on ETH layer one and layer twos. And for Solana, it needs to solve downtime. And then it needs to be able to scale in the same, it needs to be able to scale TVL and go after Ethereum's TVL and start to really cannibalize some of that dominant market share that Ethereum has. The dark horse I have for that race too is Bitcoin layer twos, because I think that's an area that we're going to see. I think that was an area that was well funded last year and will be well funded this year, and I think might introduce a new dynamic to this layer one battle, because the Bitcoin layer one is the most secure, it's the most decentralized, and so if we're able to start to build some DeFi, some proper DeFi functions on Bitcoin layer twos, then I think that's going to be a really interesting challenger for Ethereum too. And it might get squeezed between fast and cheap and secure and decentralized. So I think that's one to watch. The other narrative, I think, and this is something we've definitely seen in the last few weeks, is that there will be like the crypto native narrative, and then there'll be normie narratives, and they'll roll out on places like TikTok. I don't know if we're going to have TikTok as a major player over the next few months. There's movement there, and we might move to there's a red note or somewhere else. But I think it's going to frustrate the hell out of crypto natives with these dino coins like XRP, and there'll be this whole other narrative sphere over here in normie no coiner talk that drives price action separate from almost like the industry and the main kind of contingent of crypto speculators, traders, and natives. So I see that happening this year as well.
That's such a good point, I think.
Yeah, man, isn't it frustrating?
That's a really good way.
We're doing so much work over here, and then we just got XRP pumping because people are making funny videos on TikTok. It's wild.
I had actually one of my mates that I didn't realize she was into crypto texted me this morning saying, "Should I sell my XRP?" And I said, "How long have you had that for?" She said, 5 years. I was like, fair play for being a long-term hodler. I think I saw XRP flipped Disney this morning in terms of market cap. But I know which one I've got more from over the last few years. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how those narratives play out for sure.
100%. What about sectors? What sectors or verticals of crypto do you think are going to be big in 2025?
I think this is a continuation of some of the trends we've seen in 2024. So this one, I'm going to play it relatively safe because I think there's the most scope to miss the mark completely when we review this in a year's time. But I think one of the prevailing trends that we kind of saw towards the end of last year, and then with the increased institutional adoption, I'm expecting more of this year, is just the increase in stablecoins and stablecoin usage. So I think stablecoin market cap or stablecoins in general could double by the end of the year as more institutions use them for settlement. And I think they've become one of the prime use cases for crypto and the killer use cases over the last couple of years. The other one is real world assets, which I feel like we spoke a lot about in H1 last year, kind of went off the boil a bit in H2, but I know that there's a lot of work and a lot of building happening in that space. And so I'm not going to put my neck out and say which areas in particular, but I'm just going to say real world assets are going to be a thing in 2025. And one that my heart says, or one that I want to play out, just because it's been prevailing. This is the year of for the last few years is gaming. Um, People have been building, in stealth. We know some of the big players have been building in public as well, and have a few releases under their belt. I think the games are going to keep getting better. The integration of digital assets is going to keep getting better. But whether we're just waiting for that, and we've been waiting for this AAA killer game to come out every year, and it hasn't happened. But I do think that if we are going to onboard the next billion people into crypto and blockchain in the next year, I think gaming will have to play a big part in that, just because of how popular it is and how many people game worldwide. So, heart saying that, head I'm not so sure, but they're my three.
Awesome. In this year, I would love to see DeFi kind of really make a resurgence, and I think I'd love to see DeFi find a home. I think with the announcement this week of Tether moving to El Salvador, that is something I think we'll see more of in the next year. DeFi projects setting up headquarters in the US, in El Salvador, like maybe more of them kind of putting down roots somewhere like Dubai, the UAE. And I think that will really help these protocols or these products bridge from degenerate retail to institutional, and really start to play a role in our financial system. That would be what I would love to see in 2025. Now, obviously, we're marketing, so I'd love to hear adoption trends. How are users going to discover crypto in 2025?
I think what I've learned coming into the industry, 2.5 years ago, is that it's very hard to spark an interest in crypto, digital assets for someone that isn't already thinking about it. Investing in general is quite a big step for someone to take. It's literally taking some of their hard-earned money from savings and investing it into something a bit more speculative. And so this year, I see retail following institutions, nation states, and companies. And the more and more we see another, buy from MicroStrategy, another company starting to add Bitcoin or crypto to their balance sheet, another nation state coming in to legitimize this asset, the more and more it occupies that part of the media, and those news stories surface. That's when I think people start talking about it. People remember that they have some crypto potentially from previous cycles. They look into it a bit more. They see the positive price action, and then they come back in. And I think there's a lot, like we've already said, there's a lot to be excited about in 2025. And I think crypto holders are passionate people. And one of the things we've seen, we know for a fact, is that one of the biggest ways to onboard people into crypto is through word of mouth. And I expect there are going to be so many positive news stories and so much excitement this year that a lot of people will be telling their friends. And that's how I think we're going to see the next wave of crypto newbies coming into the space. And I don't necessarily think it's going to happen at the start of the year. I think there's a lot of these narratives, as we said, yet to play out. But everything's pointing towards, halfway through to the end of the year as being relatively strong. And I think that's feels like a right amount of time for a lot of the crypto interest to spike in normies.
Yeah, I agree. Something I had on my list for adoption trends was a mobile first approach. I would love to see, we've seen some of this, like Jupiter has a mobile app now. Obviously, the Solana phone has been a big focus for them, but I think you could still make a contrarian argument that crypto is barely usable on a mobile device. It's like you can use wallets, but then it's hard to interact. You're kind of swapping in, you're doing native swaps within wallets. Like you can't really use multiple tools. You have to switch between apps. Like I don't think it works yet. But I think this year, if more teams are focusing on that area and we build mobile first, that'll really help. which is a funny thing to say, because when I've worked in other industries, it's all mobile first. You build websites, you build mobile first, and you build desktop. Like working on e-com, you're constantly working on mobile integrations and how you can make sure that it's easy for users to pay and complete transactions on mobile. And maybe that challenge is a little higher, that bar's a little higher because of the App Store and because of the way iPhones work for crypto specifically. But that is definitely something I'd love to see. A barrier to entry I'd love to see come down this year, and that will drive adoption. I definitely think so. I also think a lot of people this year will get onboarded to crypto without knowing it through the ETFs and the expanded scope of ETFs. I agree. I think we'll see Sol, Ripple. I think we'll see a bunch more ETFs launch this year as well. And then we'll see basket ETFs, which are combining assets or sectors. And then we'll see a news like MicroStrategy being added to that NASDAQ, I think it was top 500 index, which means it gets included in a bunch of super funds. I think a lot of people will be onboarded to crypto without even knowing or realizing that they now hold crypto in their investment portfolio as a percentage allocation of like 1 or 2%. So that's one that I see this year. I also see stable coins as a big potential driver for adoption. You might have seen this week there was an announcement from a company called Nubank in Brazil, and they have a crypto wallet, and they are offering Brazilian users of their Nubank crypto wallet 4% APY, 4% interest rate on USDC held in their crypto wallet. Now, that's better than most of your bank accounts, right? It's better than my bank gives me. Probably better than your bank is. It's probably better than most people in the US get as an interest rate. And so, yeah, I think that too is going to help, particularly a lot of people around the world who are looking for some relief against inflation, only want to hold US dollars, relief from inflation in the local currency, only want to hold US dollars, and then are able to tap into yields like that. I think that's going to be a big driver of crypto adoption as well.
Yeah, nice takes.
Your most consensus trend prediction. What is your like easy shot? What are we going to see this year?
So I've said it a bunch of times, right? There's a lot to be excited about in crypto in 2025. The consensus is that it's going to be a good year this year. And as Buffett famously said, be fearful when everyone's greedy. So I, for one, would be keeping an eye on how these narratives are playing out, keeping an eye on the macroeconomic environment. And I think this year more than ever, it's really important to not only have your buy strategies nailed, but also have an idea of your sell strategies. And what proportion of your portfolio you're looking to sell and what proportion you're looking to hold for the long term. Because when everyone's saying it's going to play out this way, it just makes me a bit nervous that we're missing something. And so that's the consensus trend is that it's going to be a good year for crypto, but there's a bit of me that's like, oh, be careful.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's a bunch of macro factors that make us feel like we're like teetering on the edge a little. One of the things that I've seen talked about a lot recently is that the market cap of the like top 5 or 7, like the Mag 7 US stocks, is at its highest rate in like 100 years. And often such concentrations of dominance by the top stocks preceded recessionary periods. And through the last couple of years, right, we had this really quite heavy inflation challenge that the RBA or the Fed has had to face. And we kind of look like we have a soft landing, but do we? Yeah, have we really closed that book yet? I'm not sure. So I agree with you. I think keeping an eye out for a real liquidity event, liquidity crisis, or so even some kind of like financial crisis is definitely something that you could see as both a consensus and a contrarian trend, I think. I want to say as one of my consensus trend predictions, I've got stable coins because I think everybody thinks they're going to take off, and they're going to be pretty market agnostic too. So I think regardless of whether we pump or we dump, stable coins are going to be a pretty safe bet. But my consensus prediction too is that Bitcoin really does challenge that 4-year cycle narrative. If we get the strategic Bitcoin reserve, if we get the nation state adoption that we see, potentially Bitcoin moves from the exponential to the S curve. And I think that would be really interesting to watch as well. What about spicy takes? Do you have any contrarian predictions? Upset some people? What is not going to happen that everybody thinks is going to happen?
My contrarian trend is something very close to my heart. I actually think this year ETH may outperform Bitcoin. And I'm not clutching at straws. There are some underlying ETH narratives that I'm hoping, I'm expecting to play out, right? So the ETH ETFs have been live for a while. We're seeing inflows start to grow there. I'm also hoping that there'll be the introduction of staking on those ETH ETFs, just to provide a yield to those ETF holders, and I think that'll push a whole new narrative behind ETH, as well as ETH is constantly evolving, which is one of its pros and also one of its cons, in the sense that it's harder to find than Bitcoin, and I think as part of that evolvement, there's going to be scalability upgrades this year, and I think that will lead to more layer 2 use cases, more layer 2 activity, more DeFi activity, and more DeFi use cases, as you said. Like DeFi, a lot of DeFi lives on ETH, and so for one to succeed, I think the other has to succeed as well. And I think a lot of people forget that Ethereum provides a lot of that security to a lot of other applications on top. Gaming being another one as well. So my contrarian take is that we bottomed out on the ETH Bitcoin ratio, and it's up only in 2025 for ETH.
Max copium there for sure. No, I would like to see this too. I think you forget that ETH probably outperformed still most of TradFi in its run over the last 12 months. It just hasn't outperformed Bitcoin, and it hasn't outperformed meme coins, which is clearly not because they're tiny in market cap compared to ETH. It's been a bridesmaid in 2024. I would love to see ETH have another breakout year in 2025, both from like an adoption and a tech perspective, and then from a price perspective too. For anybody that is an ETH holder, that'd be a welcome relief from Solana Maxi's dunking on you. My contrarian spice take trend prediction is that AI is not a real. AI markets might be a mover, but AI tech is not a mover. I think the old adage of, you overestimate the short-term speed and impact, and then you underestimate the long-term market impact. I've heard a lot of people saying some big things about AI agents, and I think it's coming, but I don't know if it's going to be as widespread this year as everybody is saying. But I don't think that's going to stop the speculators moving from memes and NFTs. I think both of those will be a sidecar to the AI narrative this year. I think they capture peak speculation, but I don't think they move as quickly on the autonomous front as we'd like to see. But that's me. A lot of people are pretty bullish on AI at the moment, so let's see if that plays out.
That's it.
Any closing thoughts for 2025 before we wrap up the app?
No, I think, like I said, there's a lot to be excited about. And I do genuinely think this is going to be a breakout year in so many respects for crypto. And a lot of those sector narratives, I think, are going to play out and help on board, even more people into the space. So, yeah, we've got a work cut out for us.
We sure do, but we'll be working very hard on that here at Binance Australia. We've got our margin campaign still running, so please check out that. You can get up to 2,000 USDT in interest-free margin loans. Go ahead and trade $2,500 worth of volume, and you can go ahead and get another 8,000 USDT interest-free margin voucher. So check that out. Please let us know who you'd love to see on the show next week, and keep it coming with the feedback too. We always like to hear from our users. Thanks so much for joining us this week, James. Have a fantastic weekend to all our users, and we'll catch you next week, guys. Bye.
Peace out.
Hey Binanceans, thanks for watching. Please note that this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and for educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance.